Welcome, everyone, first and foremost, to the session, and thank you for joining us today. Really appreciate you taking the time out to join us on today's webinar that's focused on inclusive holidays, navigating faith, festivity, and belief in work. So by way of introduction, as the name suggests on the screen, if you can see that, my name is Rob Small. I am the Business Transformation Director here at Diversity UK. I am very pleased to be joined today by my colleague Helen, who will be the facilitator for today's session. And I'm not going to steal Helen's thunder. I will very much allow Helen to do an introduction shortly. In terms of just a few quick logistical items, just to run through with everyone, just so it's clear from the start. So today's session is recorded, and the main reason for that is so that we are able to share that out with both yourselves and anyone else that you wish to forward that on to after today's webinar. So that will be out within a day or so after completion and conclusion of today's session. So watch out for that. If for any reason you don't receive a copy of it, then by all means, our contact details are within obviously the communications that you've already received. So feel free to come back to us, but we will share that recording with you. With that in mind, in terms of sharing of slides, we don't share the physical slide deck attached to the session. And the main reason for that is that we deliver commercial products that are broader and longer than these sessions. So it is our intellectual property, but naturally you will have access to the recording and everything that Helen's gonna run you through today attached to the session. Throughout the webinar, everyone will be in listen-only mode, so not to worry. If you have, like myself, a bit of a sore throat at the minute and you have a cough, then not to worry. We're not going to necessarily hear you during the session. And just to reassure you, your cameras obviously are off throughout the session as well. So do feel free to just sit back, relax, and take as much as you can out of the session. Similarly, because it is recorded, there isn't necessarily a requirement for you to be making notes attached to today's session, unless obviously that's helpful to you from that perspective as well. So I'm going to hand over to Helen now to be able to do introductions and take you through today's session. So Helen, over to your good self.
Okay, lovely. Thanks for that, Rob. Hello, everyone. I am Helen Gould, as Rob has said. I am the lead trainer and EDI consultant at Diversity UK. And yeah, as Rob said, welcome to our very first webinar. So glad to see you here. I will be spending about, I think, 40 to 45 minutes on giving the information. And as Rob said, we will have some questions at the end. So please do pop those into the Q&A box and we will get to you as soon as we can. In terms of housekeeping, so this isn't as interactive as our sessions usually are. This is sort of a lecture style kind of thing. But because you are going to be able to use the chat, I do want to ask you to remember to keep an open mind in terms of thinking about how you might be hearing new things, you might be learning about new faiths, new religions, and ways of doing things. So please be aware that just because something is new to you, that doesn't mean that it is irrelevant or not important. In terms of respect, please do keep all comments and questions respectful. So be polite to each other, be civil, use polite language, and try to make sure that that is all above board. And as I said, in terms of asking questions, we will have that section at the end. Okay, so we have four main themes that we're going to try and cover today. The first one being a quick reminder of how religion and belief is defined in the Equality Act. So they have very specific definitions that I'll be explaining to you. I will also quickly go through a range of different religious holidays that can occur throughout December and January, because it's not just Christmas. We'll also talk about some common religious stereotypes and biases, how those can come across and how we might be able to reduce those. And we will also think about how we might be able to change our language or our behaviors to be more inclusive of people with different kinds of faiths and beliefs and religions during this festive period. So, first things first, when we're thinking about the Equality Act 2010, that is, of course, our current anti-discrimination legislation within the UK. And as I said, there are very specific definitions within the law on what a religion is and what a belief is. So, firstly, a religion must be of sufficient seriousness, i.e., it's not the kind of thing that you're taking part in lightly or as a joke. It is something where it means something to the people who are engaging with it. It needs to have a clear structure, so it needs to be able to be defined, basically. There needs to be a commonality between the different practices and holidays or services, whatever that might be. And there needs to be a clear belief system. So it needs to be recognizable what people of a religion believe, what the deities are, what their faith requires in terms of observances, all of those kinds of things. And then when it comes to a belief, this is where it's not necessarily spiritual or about faith. So this is where you might think of something like veganism, for example. That might be considered as a belief. And that's because it is a belief which is genuinely held. So vegans mean it when they say that they are vegan. It's about a significant aspect of humanity, so it's concerning both what we eat and how we eat, and also how we treat the environment and animals and nature. Clear, consistent, and important. So a belief has to be the same all the way through. It has to be obvious what that belief is. It is something that shouldn't be able to be changed on a whim. And in terms of important, again, it has to affect a significant part of your life. Worthy of respect in a democratic society basically means it's not breaking any laws or anything like that. And then compatible with human dignity and fundamental rights. So it's not infringing on anybody else's rights. So a belief that says, if someone said, I believe that everybody of this religion is evil, that would not be protected as a belief. That is not something that a person can act on because it is not compatible with the rights of others to their own beliefs. It's also useful to note that this is also something that's protected not just in UK law, but under the European Convention on Human Rights. So Article 9 says that everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion, subject only to such limitations as are prescribed by law and are necessary in a democratic society. So it's echoing what we already have, which is you are free to believe in whatever you like as long as it's not hurting anybody else. So, as I've said, religion and belief are protected characteristics, which means that you cannot discriminate against a person just for the belief that they hold. If that belief leads them to treating other people badly, then you may need to, for example, do grievance procedures or disciplinary because of that behavior, not because of the belief. There's an important distinction to make there. However, it also includes not having a particular religion or belief. So if someone is an atheist, they can't be discriminated against either for not believing in any god or in a particular god. So, in terms of discrimination, this might look like excluding staff members from work socials because they don't drink alcohol for religious reasons. Because this is something that is being put on by the organization, and this person has not been invited specifically because of a religious belief, that would be discriminatory. Another one is refusing annual leave requests if it's for a religious holiday. So if you normally approve everybody else's holidays, but not this person's because it's to celebrate something to do with their religion, that is also clear religious discrimination. And then we've got forcing or attempting to force a person into engaging in religious practices at work. So, I don't know, let's say you go out for a meal with everyone and someone insists on everybody saying grace before eating. That is something that would be discriminatory because you are not being inclusive of people of different faiths, or, of course, as I've said, of no faith at all. So one example that has come up quite recently is the Abdi versus Odeon Cinemas tribunal. So Ms. Abdi said that she was discriminated against based on her religion, but also on her race. And part of that tribunal was that she wasn't invited to the Christmas party because she was Muslim and did not drink. So she said that in addition to this, there had been negative racial comments made about her hair, about her race, from different staff members. So she was being harassed in addition to this. But she also said that she had wanted to attend the Christmas party and being deliberately excluded from it because of her religion was not what she wanted. And that complaint was upheld. So that is an example that has happened in recent years. Okay, so now we know what religions are and beliefs are. We know what discrimination looks like, and we've looked at a real example. I'm going to just quickly run through sort of a range of different religious holidays that happen in the winter. I will include different kinds of the Christian holidays, but there are also others that you should be aware of. So, the first one we've got here is Hanukkah. So, this is a Jewish holiday which can run from any time from the end of November to the end of December because it is based on the lunar calendar. It lasts for 8 days and is a time where people will be lighting candles, specifically a menorah, and it's there to celebrate the victory of a group of Jews called the Maccabees against sort of a Greek king that was trying to ban Judaism, basically. So this holiday celebrates both their victory and also the repairing and rededicating of their Jewish temple. And the story is that they lit a lamp in it, and there's only enough oil for it to be lit for one day, but it burned for 8 days. And so that is why the holiday is for 8 nights and days. And that's also why the menorah is important to it as well. Next, we have Bodhi Day. So this is on the 8th of December, and this is a Buddhist holiday, and it is there to mark the moment that the Buddha attained enlightenment. So this is something that happened about it's a couple of thousand years ago now, I believe. And this is the date when the Buddha gained the insight that meant that he transcended humanity. There is also, however, a Bodhi Day that is based on the lunar calendar, and so that's going to change every year. But I thought it was useful to mention there's also this one as well. Then, around the 21st, 22nd of December, we have the winter solstice, also known as Yule or midwinter. And so this is often celebrated by those who are practicing paganism or who are involved with Wicca. And this is about celebrating the shortest day and the longest night of the year. So it's sort of, we've reached the middle of winter. So from now on, the days are going to get longer. We're going to start approaching spring. And it is often seen as a very spiritual time. Then, of course, 25th of December, that is Christmas Day, when Jesus Christ was born, who is, of course, a central figure to Christianity. The day after, which we might know as Boxing Day on the 26th of December, that is the day that the prophet Zoroaster died, who was the founder of Zoroastrianism. And this is not, this is more of a commemorative holiday than a celebratory one, because of course it was the day that he died. So it tends to be something where people are commemorating it. They might be offering prayers, they might be going to temples and those kinds of things. So, moving into January, on the 6th, we have Epiphany. So, this was when the Magi or wise men visited baby Jesus and gave their gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. On the same day, we also have Guru Gobind Singh Gurpurab. So, this is the birthday of the 10th Guru in Sikhism, which is Guru Gobind Singh. And he is a very famous guru within that religion. Could be described as a saint, but he was also a poet. He also created a community of how might you put it? I suppose sort of warriors or soldiers whose mission was to defend the weak, protect the helpless, those kinds of things. So this is a festival to celebrate his birthday. Then a few days later, well, about a week later, on the 15th or 14th of January, we have Pongal. And this is a harvest festival and the end of the winter solstice amongst Hindus. Um, it is generally a time to express gratitude for the harvest, for the end of the harvest season. It tends to last for 4 days, and there's a special dish that is also called pongal. So that is using rice and lentils. People tend to decorate their homes. They might put on new clothes, exchange gifts. It's a more joyous holiday. And then at some point during January, whenever the first full moon is, we also have the Mahayana New Year. So Mahayana is a particular branch of Buddhism, and this is when they commemorate the birth, enlightenment, and passing of the Buddha. So this is something that you will often find among communities from sort of Northeast Asia. And so they are more commonly of that particular branch of Buddhism. So there we go. All right, so we now know what religions and beliefs are. We know which festivals or holy days are happening throughout December and January. So now we're going to talk about more generally some common stereotypes and biases that people might have about religions or about people who follow certain religions. So, the first thing to understand about bias is that we all have them. The starting point for bias is often, well, the way that our brain is structured. Firstly, it likes to jump to decisions very quickly because it's a very big and powerful organ, which means that it's always trying to do things as quickly as possible, as efficiently as possible. So we sort of naturally make snap decisions and snap judgments all of the time. The information that our brain uses to do that is usually based on previous information that the brain has, because that is the most efficient way that it can do that. So this means that a lot of the time, the snap judgments that we're making, the decisions we're making in what we're saying, what we're doing, how we're treating people, has been reached very, very quickly based on existing information that we might not necessarily have checked or challenged it ourselves, because that previous information often involves stereotypes and assumptions about others. So, this is how unconscious bias can appear in our actions and in our words. Usually, it's not intentional, it's not necessarily malicious, but we can still upset others and be hurtful and sometimes even discriminatory by essentially acting or speaking before we've thought through what the implications are or how other people might feel about that. Having biases by itself does not make you a bad person. As I said, it is part of how the brain works and how it's been structured over time. However, though we're not necessarily in control of our brain functions, we are in control of what we do and say. And so being aware of unconscious bias is part of being able to challenge it. There are also several sources for where these biases can come from. So, culture and media is a big one. If you grow up in a culture that says, this religion is bad and that religion is good, that is something that you are likely to absorb. Even if later on you realize that that's not true, because it's something that you probably have been internalizing since childhood, it can still be there unconsciously, affecting the ways that you behave and the ways that you treat people. Similarly, for your family, the way that you were brought up, perhaps the religion that your family believes, how sort of significant figures talked about different religions, all of that also will have been absorbed over time and will need conscious challenging or research on your part to try to change the automatic decisions that you're making. Then we've got peer groups. So that's your colleagues, your friends, the people you do your hobbies and interests with. Because they are a group that your brain is likely to say, okay, we know these people, we are safe around them, therefore we can trust them. Your brain is likely to just, again, absorb whatever they're saying and not necessarily fact check it. And so this means that if you're around people who are all repeating a particular stereotype or who are all talking about a particular religion in negative ways, that's something that your brain is going to translate into its decision-making processes. And then, of course, we've got life experiences. So let me think. So my dad was an atheist, and his memories of going to church as a child were. He said that it was very much a fire and brimstone kind of experience, and eventually he avoided church altogether. And ever since then, he wouldn't really go to church services. He would still visit them to look at the architecture, but he was not particularly keen on attending services if he didn't have to. So his life experience of being scared by sermons in church as a child then affected his behavior as an adult when it came to other churches. So that is another example of how that can influence you growing up. So this slide is explaining how stereotypes can inform the biases that we have and how that can then translate into harmful behavior. So the stereotype is an exaggerated belief about a particular group, usually a negative belief, and usually about a group that is in the minority. And so this is something like, as we've got here, followers of that religion hate people like me. But it could also be things like all football fans are hooligans, or uh, all people of this faith must believe X or Y. Because it is useful to note that in any faith and any religion, there are different levels of how devout people are. There are often lots of discussions going on into how to interpret this saying or this passage and things like that. So, um, just as an aside, you can never really say because a person is part of this religion, these must be all the things they believe. But that is exactly what a stereotype does. It's a very exaggerated, very static belief that is applied to a huge group of people, um, and usually it is a negative belief. So, if you have that stereotype in mind, or if that's something that has been repeated to you, or which is embedded in the culture you're in, that is where it can start to affect your decision making and therefore make you act in biased ways. So, the stereotype, followers of that religion hate people like me. And then the bias is where you apply that stereotype to a particular person. So, this person follows that religion, therefore they must hate me. Okay? So, the stereotype is the belief, the bias is applying that belief to a particular person or situation. And then, of course, once you have done that, that's where the harmful behavior can come in. So you act on the bias that has been influenced by the stereotype. So that is, I'm going to avoid this person, or I'm going to treat them differently. I'm going to treat them badly. So if this is something that's happening in the workplace, you might think, oh, that person is uh, wearing a visible representation of their religion, and this is a thing I believe about that religion, therefore I'm going to exclude them or I'm going to avoid them. And that's the kind of thing that can start to lead to sort of negative and hostile environments within a workplace. There are also some more specific examples that we've put together. So things like projecting your own experiences with religion onto others. So the example we've got here, this person is Christian, so they must be homophobic. So this is something where people have over time regularly used Christianity to justify their homophobia. And there are many Christians who do believe that, being LGBT is a sin and things like that. But there are also many, many Christians who don't believe that. And of course, there are LGBT Christians. I know, yeah, I know a handful of people who are part of a faith where part of the holy book does say something along the lines of a man must not lie with another man and things like that. But because, as I said, people interpret things in different ways, and people can sometimes they can make choices about which parts of their religion they follow, which parts to take seriously, which parts not. This is something that you cannot apply to any large group. Another one, assuming everyone from a certain religion looks or acts the same. So, the my background, my mother's side of the family is from a small country in West Africa, which is about 85% Muslim. But for many people, the idea in their mind of what a Muslim looks like does not look like many of the Muslim members of my family. And so it is likely that if one of them told a colleague that they were Muslim, that colleague would react with surprise because, again, there is this stereotype, this assumption about what a Muslim looks like or where Muslim people are from. When in fact, of course, Muslims can be from all over the world. Religions are not region specific; they are all over the globe. And so you cannot assume that because of someone's race or appearance, they must follow a certain religion or vice versa. Another one, particularly for those of you who might be organizing social events, forgetting about or ignoring dietary requirements often means that there is a bias there towards assuming that everybody eats or enjoys the same foods as you. So, of course, two major examples is not ensuring that there is kosher or halal meat available. But also, there are several different religions and faiths that encourage their followers to be vegetarian or even vegan as well. So, trying to make sure that you're aware of your staff demographics and what the different dietary needs might be is something that is really important there. And then, as I said before, associating a religion with a particular region. So, assuming that someone from India or the Middle East must be Muslim, that is again an example of your bias, because the bias usually is um, people in the Middle East are predominantly Muslim, therefore this particular person must be Muslim. And that is not always necessarily the case. So, in terms of what we can do to mitigate our biases around religions and around people who practice those religions, the first thing I want to mention is that it's really important to accept that you can make mistakes in your assumptions about other people, and then that's a normal thing to do. That's okay. And the reason I say this is because when these mistakes do happen, a lot of the time it can be solved by just apologizing and changing your behavior. But in many instances, people instead will double down, or they will really go on the defensive, or they will start to deny that they did anything wrong and those kinds of things. And that is usually what makes things into a bigger problem than they need to be. And those reactions often come from the idea that if I make a mistake, then I am a bad person, which of course is quite an unkind thing to think about yourself and is not true, because as human beings, we are all going to make mistakes sometimes. So it is a much more productive thing to think, I am going to make mistakes sometimes. How will I react when that happens? So think about, accept the fact that you will make a mistake at some point and think in advance about how you're going to handle that rather than defaulting to the idea of, oh no, well, I can't possibly have done that, or basing your reaction on the idea that making a mistake indicates something about your morality. The next thing we've got, be open to learning. So, firstly, if you're here, that probably means that you are open to learning. So, thank you for that. But this should not be the only time that you engage with thinking about different kinds of religions and faiths. Most religions do have like organizations and lots of websites with information about what they believe and what they do. So please do, if there's something that you don't know about or that you're interested in, go and look it up and see what you can find out. One of the main tools in challenging the biases we have is gathering information that disproves the previous things that we have that might be based on stereotypes or on prejudices. So, learning more is how we can start to dilute those biases. Next, we have broaden your media consumption. So, this is just about, in terms of fiction and non-fiction, the media that we're consuming, whether it's news outlets or books or TV shows or even social media. If you find that you are always hearing from the same kinds of people with the same backgrounds and they're always saying the same kinds of thing, it might be a good indicator to think, okay, where are the other perspectives? What might I be missing? Are there people who are being talked about a lot, but you're never hearing from them, only other people's opinions about them? Those are times when it might be useful to think, okay, where can I get other kinds of information? This doesn't mean that you have to go and change your mind about anything, just that the broader the information that you can take in, the more objective you can be. And again, this is hand in hand with being open to learning. This is about taking in more information to dilute the biases that you already have, and create a fuller picture of the world. Next, we have check your reasoning on important decisions. So if you're deciding on, say, when to schedule a meeting, you might automatically think, oh, Friday afternoon is a good time for this meeting because most people will be available, or whichever reason it might be. If you think through, okay, why have I assumed that? You might then think, oh, wait, we have some colleagues who are Muslim, and I know that Friday afternoon prayers are very important. So maybe I should choose a different time or a different date. Okay. So instead of going with the gut instinct or what seems like common sense, actually list out the reasons for why you're making any particular decision, particularly if it comes to things like hiring or promotion as well. But just in general, it is useful to know why you are doing something instead of just it feels about right, because that is often where bias can start to creep in. Similarly, try to involve multiple people in big decisions. This can mean that you'll get lots of different perspectives, and you might get information from those people that you might have missed previously if it was just you by yourself. Then we've got self-awareness and reflection. This goes hand in hand with that acceptance that you can make mistakes. Um, you have to be aware that you can be wrong sometimes. You have to be aware that there are times where maybe you haven't behaved in the way that you would have liked, or that you have made assumptions, that you have expressed bias. And again, that's okay because none of us are perfect. But it's important to be able to admit that and to reflect on your behavior and think, okay, I remember doing this thing that time, and I'm going to try and avoid doing that in future. So this is about thinking about what's happened before and how you can improve for future occasions. And then lastly, take your time. So again, when it comes to making important decisions, particularly decisions that affect people, try to give the appropriate amount of time to considering all the different factors, to getting different kinds of information that you might need, to talking to people. Because generally, when we feel stressed or under pressure, particularly time pressure, that is when our biases can leak in. Because again, this is about often jumping to conclusions, and it means that those conclusions are more likely to be biased if we feel like we have to make a snap decision very quickly. Okay, so the final bit then, before we start to wrap up and we take some questions, is thinking about inclusive language and behaviors around faith and the holidays. So, as a reminder, these are just suggestions. We're not saying that you have to take these on board, but if you want to try and be more inclusive, here are some things that you might be able to do. So instead of saying Merry Christmas to everyone, you might want to try Happy Holidays or Season's Greetings, or indeed a combination. You might say something like Merry Christmas to everyone who celebrates, and for everyone who doesn't, I hope you have a pleasant break or something like that. So that way you are including both people who do and don't celebrate. Instead of saying God bless and things like that, you might say have a good time, enjoy the season, things like that. Essentially trying not to make assumptions about whether someone believes in good or not, in God or not, or about, of course, who that God is and what their name is. If you are planning a Christmas party. You might call that instead the end of year party, the winter party, December party, those kinds of things. Again, these are all basically ways of saying the same thing without necessarily saying Christmas. Because again, although as a country we do tend to shut down for this whole period for like historical and cultural reasons, not everybody is going to be religious. In fact, from memory, I think it's 47% of people at the last census said that they were Christian, and the next biggest group after that were people saying that they didn't have any religion. So that is a couple of useful statistics for you as well. And then lastly, and this is a good tip for anything, but instead of assuming that everyone does what you do, try asking them. So instead of saying to someone, I don't know, are you going to go to midnight mass or something like that? You might just say, oh, what are you doing on Christmas Day? Or what are you doing over the break? Or what are your plans for the holidays? So instead of assuming that someone is going to celebrate specifically in the same ways that you do, ask them a broader question, try to be more open, and that is likely to give you a better conversation in general. So then, in terms of behavior suggestions, um, if you are in a position where you have access to what the demographics of your staff are, um, take a look at what faiths and religions people have expressed and see if there is scope to raise awareness about different holidays and festivals. So, not just the Christian ones, which is, of course, usually the assumptions that people make, but do you also have a large cohort of people who are Sikh or who are Muslim or who are Buddhist, those kinds of things? And then that can give you a steer for whether you should also be celebrating those things in the office. Another thing, which isn't necessarily related to what faith someone has, but is still useful to know, is to consider a range of different kinds of social events. So often when people think about a typical Christmas party, it's quite loud, there's lots of music, there's dancing, lots of alcohol, and those kinds of things. But there are people who, for a variety of reasons, whether it's because they are neurodivergent or perhaps they have, maybe they're traveling the next day or whatever it might be, see if you can also include some quieter options for social events as well. Essentially, not everybody is going to be fully engaged with an all-out party. Maybe some people might appreciate a lunch or something like that instead. Another thing, as I said before, dietary requirements are often overlooked because of the assumptions people make about different kinds of food preferences and requirements. So try to think about alcohol-free options, varied diets, so people who don't drink or who don't eat pork, but also people who might be gluten-free or have other kinds of food intolerances. Try to make sure that you have information about that beforehand and cater to it. And also, when it comes to time off, again, it might be that someone doesn't necessarily want a week or 2 week shutdown at Christmas time. It might be that another celebration at a different time of the year is more important to them. So, if you can avoid a mandatory shutdown around this time of the year, then I would advise you to do so. Or you can allow people to swap those days for a different time of year when they might be more in need of that. Okay, so it is time for us to start wrapping up. In terms of recommended resources, I would always recommend ACAS. They're a really, really useful organization in terms of how they can translate quite complicated legislation into easy to read bullet points. There's also the CIPD that can give you more sort of nuanced and detailed resources like toolkits and different kinds of guides and things like that. There's also the Religion Media Center, which is basically a place that sort of UK organizations of different faiths can go and they can release press releases so you can keep up to date with different things that are concerning different communities. There's also Stop Hate UK. So they are an organization that raises awareness around hate crimes and also provides support for people who experience them. And so they have a lot of resources around religious hate crime, but also other types. And then there is a book suggestion here, which is called The Religions Book, Big Ideas Simply Explained. And that is quite a comprehensive guide to a number of different faiths, with lots of like charts and infographics and things like that to make it easier to understand and digest. So, what I would recommend you take a couple of minutes to do is to think about, after everything that I've explained and the suggestions I've given, if there's something that you can start doing. So maybe it's, I don't know, making sure that you're taking demographics of your staff every year so you know which kinds of holidays um, and holy days might be happening. If there's anything that you can continue doing. So if you've now identified, oh, we do that, that is best practice, make sure that you make a note of that. And then if there's anything that you can stop doing. So do you always advertise it as the Christmas party? Could that language be changed? Those kinds of things. So while you're doing that, here is the QR code for our training evaluation. We will be taking a look at that. Please feel free to put in feedback of all kinds, either about the content itself or the experience of this webinar, and maybe how we can do things better in the future, because this is our first one, and we always want to improve for you. Okay, so time for some questions. Rob, if you can help me out with that.
Yeah, of course, of course. So I was just trying to get myself off mute, the typical error. Give you a breather for 2 seconds, for sure. We did have some pre-submitted questions that already came through to us that I will take a look at. But there's a really interesting question that's just been posed from that perspective as well. Um, so yeah, I'll fire away. So thinking about trying to combat stereotypes from an HR point of view, would it be worth clearing up some of these preemptively? So, i.e., sending out fact emails with mini facts about less known holidays. So, yes, what your thoughts
Absolutely.
are.
Oh yeah. I think with any kind of EDI initiative, getting being proactive about things and being able to answer questions before they're asked, or if you know that there is an existing misconception, being able to adjust that, I would highly, highly recommend it.
Oh, thank you. And I guess some of the resources that you recommended would be great places to start, in all fairness, in
Yes,
terms of pulling that together. So, perfect.
absolutely.
Um, so, another question we have is we have colleagues from many different religions. How do
Mhm.
we acknowledge holidays equitably without overwhelming people? Is there a practical middle ground? Which kind of links to the previous question, I
Mm.
guess.
Yes. So this is where having the demographics of your staff might come into play. Because that way, if you know what the religious breakdown of your staff is, then you can identify which holy days are important, when people are likely to be celebrating. So I would definitely say you've got to get that data first. Obviously, there are so many festivals and holidays going on throughout the year, and it would probably be impossible to celebrate all of them. But there are resources that can tell you about the major ones. So, like Ramadan is a big one, so is Hanukkah, Yom Kippur as well. All of those are important. So I would say figure out what is most relevant to your team and act on accordingly.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we are getting questions through, so I hope you're prepared. So I heard
Excellent.
recently that an organization decided not to celebrate or make any focus on any religious holidays to avoid missing Ellie or alienating people. Is this possibly or potentially, sorry, a good idea?
Ooh. It might be. Um, I think that there would still need to be some awareness in terms of um, where a religious holiday might impact people. So, for example, if you are thinking, again, if I go back to something like Ramadan, if someone is fasting, then that might like have a physical, practical effect on them. So I do think that if you do have people who practice that in the organization, it's useful to at least make people aware that that is happening. But if not, it may well be that you take a position of we're not going to talk about religion at all. So I think as long as you still have policies around this is what we consider to be discriminatory behavior, as long as it's not something that people feel that they can use against people or that they can use in a negative way, I don't see there being anything particularly discriminatory about that.
Okay. Yeah, so maybe an option for some, I should say. Okay. Definitely a question that's probably quite timely with everything that's gone around, certainly in the media space of late. So, how
Mm.
do you address any pushback when you stop calling Christmas Christmas for events? Some people are very protective over this and will accuse you of not respecting their rights to celebrate it as a Christmas event.
Mm. Yes, this is something that has come up recently as well because I was giving a training session earlier. When was it? Last week, I think. And I gave the exact same advice where I said, if you are an organization, it might be more inclusive to say happy holidays or season's greetings or something like that instead of Merry Christmas, because not everybody celebrates Merry Christmas. I think in terms of handling that, it would be useful to have something written down already in terms of what your policies around inclusion are, and just phrase it in terms of, okay, as it says in this policy here, we want to try and be inclusive of all faiths. We're not saying that nobody can say Merry Christmas. It is just that with events that we as an organization are putting on, we want to make sure that everybody feels comfortable attending. But as I said, it may well be like, to be clear, it's in my experience quite rare that someone says, the word Christmas offends me or whatever it is. That's not why we advise using different terms. We advise using different terms not as a reaction to someone saying that they don't like it, but rather to open it up to try to be proactive and avoid avoid that feeling that there is an assumption that everybody does the same thing, that feeling of being the minority, of being ignored. So I would say make clear that it's just in relation to organizational things, point them to any existing relevant policies that you have, and be clear that you are not infringing on their personal rights to do anything. It is a company stance. That's what I would say.
Thank you. And I think you made a really valid point in relation to this question earlier in terms of it's the not assuming part.
Mm,
So there's nothing necessarily wrong with saying, Merry Christmas from that side of things, but it's also being inclusive in that in terms of not making the assumption that everyone is celebrating Christmas and getting to know the person and asking the
yeah.
questions more openly is key. But yeah, okay. Thank you. Um, and are there examples of language that we should avoid in internal comms around this time of year?
Ooh, that's an interesting one. We've mentioned some already. I think explicitly religious language, where it relates to a particular faith, is usually one. So, like I said, something like God bless um, is probably not appropriate. Um, Other things, I'm not sure, honestly. There are very few words that are going to be inherently offensive. Um, but yes, I would say um, either, I would say if you want to be inclusive of multiple different faiths, or of course of people who don't practice any faith, um, don't focus everything around Christmas. Talk about things as like winter, um, as end of the year, seasonal, those kinds of things. Um, and I would also maybe avoid assumptions around whether people are going to particular religious places, like to church and stuff like that. Um, but otherwise, it's mostly what I would say would be my interpretation of common sense. But of course, not everybody's common sense is the same. Um, yeah, I would say try to use neutral terms as much as possible. Or, as I said before, a combination of them. So, Merry Christmas to those who celebrate. For those who are not celebrating, I hope you have a restful holiday and those kinds of things.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it's a very broad question, but it was submitted, so I thought it was important to ask. Um,
Absolutely.
so I think we've got time. We've got a couple of minutes left, so maybe time for quick fire answers on a couple more. So
Ooh.
some stuff feel uncomfortable talking about religion at work. How do we open up the conversation safely?
Mm. So, in terms of doing it safely and opening up that conversation, I think what we're talking about here is facilitation, I think, if you're talking about a literal conversation, if you're talking about discussing it at work. And so I would say try to make sure that in these discussions, that you have someone who is in charge of it and that they have experience in facilitating, in mediating, in making sure that they are laying ground rules and holding people to them. I also think that it's important in general to have clear rules around code of conduct, around discussions, and what is or is not acceptable to say. Because I think a lot of this comes from like one of the most common things that I hear when I'm doing EDI sessions is people saying, I don't know what I can or can't say. And so it might be that just being clear about that with your staff will help. It's that thing where people will say things like, "Oh, you can't sing Bar Bar Black Sheep anymore," which of course has never been true. But that morphed into, "Oh, you can't say the color black." And so that kind of uncertainty where people have sort of heard through rumors, through urban legends, through exaggerated hearsay, that is often what is causing the discomfort. So I think making sure that there is clarity about what is and is not acceptable behavior. And also, if you're going to actively have a conversation about it, make sure that you have people who know how to handle these conversations present. But also, it doesn't necessarily have to be something that's really serious. Like you can use videos, you can have events, you can have a more relaxed environment for people to get to know these things. Like you can have like a potluck kind of thing, where everyone might bring a particular food or a particular dish. Because definitely, in my experience, everyone loves talking about what foods they like. And if someone is bringing like a cultural or religious dish, they're usually happy to talk about it and share that. So that might be a positive way of doing it too.
For real. Thank you. Not so quick fire, Helen, but that is not a problem at all. You
Sorry.
gave a very comprehensive answer. So we have had some other questions submitted. So our commitment will be, obviously, we will take those away. And as part of sending out the recording after this session, we'll obviously include the responses to those in text form. And again, by all
Mm,
means, you're more than welcome to come back to us with any further questions outside of that as well. So just to close things off then for everyone. So the next webinar, we're giving you exclusive access to it to be able to register and secure your place. So it will be taking place on the 8th of January. And it's focused all around mental health. So New Year, Real You, prioritizing mental health in the workplace. So set to be a really interesting, insightful session. So all you need to do is effectively scan the QR code like you did for the feedback, and you'll be able to secure your place for the next one in the series. And yeah, I guess just an opportunity from both Helen and I to say thank you so much for coming along on the journey with us through the webinar. And Helen, personal thanks to you as well in terms of being able to not only navigate what is a very sensitive but meaningful and important subject in that space, and being able to kind of just off the cuff do some quick fire questions for us as well. It's much appreciated.
Yes. Thank you all for coming. Um, and yeah, hooray for our first webinar.
Brilliant.
Hope to see you on some courses soon.
Yeah. Enjoy the rest of the year, everyone. And yeah, any questions, by all means, feel free to come back to us, and we'll look forward to hopefully seeing some of you on the next one. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Take care.